Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you enjoyed your lunch. We will now continue with the third session. So actually, that's the last session with 3 speakers before we proceed with the closing of this Lean CC conference. I would now like to introduce Mr. Carlo Gioponi. He's an associate professor at the Department of Economics of the University of Ca' Foscari, where he teaches PhD classes on natural resources management and climate change. Carlo has authored and co-authored more than 230 scientific and professional papers, and he is member of the Council of the European Climate Forum, and he will present the postgraduate education at Ca' Foscari University. Please, Carlo.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I've been asked to introduce you to what are our activities at Ca' Foscari University in terms of higher education, somehow related to climate change. So I'll try to go back to my presentation with the help of Margherita. Being more or less at the end of this interesting meeting and close to the end of the project, I think the sense of giving you this presentation today is maybe refreshing something that you may have seen before, because I know Margherita already presented somehow Ca' Foscari in previous meetings, but also maybe thinking at possible further collaboration in the future. First of all, as usual, where we are, just to say that we are actually in this small island in front of, here, San Servolo, and but you can see a lot of places where there are sites of Ca' Foscari University here in Venice, and there are also some in the mainland, mainly for science, computer science, environmental sciences. So this university originally was established as a Royal Business College many years ago, actually, 1868. So we have a long tradition in business, actually, economics. Nice to know that at that time already business was intended as something with an international dimension, in particular for being in Venice. And that's the reason also why we develop a sort of rather strong tradition in foreign languages. But as you can see in this slide, our university has currently 4 main pillars, let's say: economics, humanities, languages, foreign languages, meaning, and sciences. A few words about how we are organized. We follow the Bologna process, which is the European process of the reform of university courses. So we have first a cycle degree, which is more or less equivalent to a bachelor, usually 3 years. Then we have a second cycle degree program, which is usually called, in English, is called masters. But we have also what we call specialist or professional masters program, which can be 1 or 2 years, and they may follow a bachelor or a master's. And then we have, obviously, the third level of the Bologna process, which is PhD programs. We have several joint and double degrees, which is therefore some kind of course that has an international dimension in collaboration with foreign universities. And you see some of the entry doors if you want to go more into details of these activities through our website. So just a few figures. We currently have, but these figures may be already old because we are now at the beginning of another academic year. We have some 15 first cycle degree programs, and then we offer more choices in terms of second level, both in terms of masters that we call laurea magistrale, and these so-called specialist master's programs, which could be 1 or 2 years, as I said. Then we have 16 research doctorates and several other activities. In order to give you a rough figure of the dimension of the university, we have approximately 20,000 students here and 4,000 new enrollment per year. So many activities here are carried out in Italian, obviously, but we have an increasing activity that we call international ca' foscari, because these courses are usually given in English, okay? Thanks to these kind of agreements like double or joint degree programs or Erasmus Mundus, Tempus, or other kind of European activities, activities supported with European grants. So these are just 4 pictures to show you, for example, in the economic areas, what are the international programs that we have in progress at the moment. For example, a bachelor in collaboration with Georgia State in the US, and other master degrees and PhD programs. All these activities are taught in English. You may be interested, probably, specifically in some activities that are more strictly related to climate change. They are here allocated to the scientific area, actually, but they are carried out as a strict collaboration between multiple disciplinary areas, actually, as it is our a PhD program on science and management of climate change. We have the new students, new cohort of this year in this room today. And it may be of interest the fact that we have, for example, a joint degree on sustainable development with several other European universities and a Japanese university. I'm mentioning these activities also because they could be the basis for maybe some kind of future collaboration, okay? Because these activities are already there and could be the basis for maybe developing new proposals in the near future. A few slides to mention the fact that our university is investing very much on sustainability. So we have our own website on sustainable ca' foscari, and we have several efforts not only in the field of teaching and training, but also really in the management of the university itself, in order to make our university to be sustainable. For example, low carbon or limited use of resources, water, and so on. And for example, we are organizing in a month from now a workshop that is focused in particular on this idea of including sustainability in university rankings. And it will be, if you may be interested in, on the 21st of October this year. I mentioned already this joint master degree in sustainable development, where we have some activities that are specifically related with climate. I don't go into the details, but all the colleagues from other universities that are involved in this program, they are, unfortunately for them and us, experienced with our bureaucracy, unfortunately. So I must say from now that in Italy we have some strict rules in terms of labeling our courses. So if this course is a course somehow related with environmental sciences, it must follow a specific set of rules by including at least a number of ECTS for mathematics, for example, or chemistry, and so on. And this is usually one of our problems, because this constrains quite a bit our capabilities in terms of developing collaborations with the foreign institutions. But so this is to say that I told you already, you were informed in case you really wanted to go for future collaborations, you knew already. Okay, we have something that could also be of interest, is this masters, relatively recent activity on sustainability and carbon footprint, which is an example maybe somehow related with the presentation we had this morning about climate kick, because this is obviously very much related to the business, okay? Because, for example, carbon footprint is one typical marketing strategies that firms are considering. I'm going to conclude my presentation with a few slides about this PhD program. We are now, if I'm not mistaken, with the seventh cycle of students enrolling in this PhD, which started in 2007. It is based on a collaboration between our university and the Euro-Mediterranean Center for Climate Change, CMCC, as you can see, which is providing a grant for us for carrying out and supporting this, this initiative. But all the activities of this PhD are given in English, are managed in English. But it could also be of interest that we are taking a sort of a challenge which is quite typical of dealing with climate change by organizing two streams on dynamic climatology. The first, which is based in Bologna, and the second, which is based in Venice, which is specific instead for impact and management of climate change. The first, let's say in few words, physics. The second, more environmental sciences, economics, and so on. So this is indeed a challenge that I think everybody is facing when designing courses on climate change. And we are trying anyhow to let these two communities to interact and also develop some common understanding and common basis. But as I said, this is indeed a challenge. And we have a specific focus also on dynamics, actually, of these problems. Dynamics as a basis to analyze the problems and developing also tools for evaluation and therefore for management, in some cases monetary evaluation. This is a few words about the Euro-Mediterranean Center, which is again possibly of interest because it is a consortium. It is one of the few cases in which we could provide here in Italy a critical mass focused on the same topic with institutions scattered all across the country. So research institutions and universities with this ambition, therefore, to provide a one entry door for climate change in Italy. This is the list of classes. Our PhD program is organized into these two streams, and our students, they usually dedicate the first year to attending these classes. The second year is devoted usually to international collaborations. The third year is in theory for the thesis, which should of course have been developed since the first or second year, but students can, and they usually do, quite often at the fourth year to conclude their efforts. We are part of a doctoral school, which is another effort to combine Italian activities in the field of climate change at the higher level. These are other PhD programs who join efforts to organize summer schools, to coordinate teaching activities. What we are doing at the moment is we are transforming this agreement between several universities into a formalized consortium for the management of a single PhD program in Italy. Just to conclude, a few more information about activities that are in place in Venice related to climate change education. ClimaAdapt is a Tempus program, so another branch of European funded activities in teaching and training, specifically aimed at developing skills in the Maghreb, therefore it's Morocco, Algeria and Tunisia, with a long list of other universities in which we are cooperating to develop a 2-year master course following the Bologna process to provide opportunities for higher education in these 3 countries, 6 universities. And this is something that I wanted to use as a last slide, which is a master degree that we will be offering since the next year, not this academic year. This is actually formally a Master in Environmental Sciences according to Italian law, but it is specifically focused on global change and climate change in particular. This is the list of classes. It's still a tentative list, but it's rather consolidated. And for us, this is a very ambitious initiative because such a specialist a master course should have a broad geographical area to collect interested students. And that's why we are very much looking forward to see also if we can find in 12 months from now opportunities also to network and collaborate with other institutions to share these efforts and maybe set up a network of masters which could be more ambitious than what we can carry out with our effort only here in Venice. That's, I think, is all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Carlo, for your presentation. Now, you presented some very interesting initiatives here, the new proposal on Master of Science on Global Change. You also presented the Mediterranean Center on Climate Change, and that Mediterranean Center on Climate Change was it's very interesting to hear that, and I also wonder if you also involve foreign partners in that climate change center.
Consortium, meaning that within the consortium we have Italian institutions, but the ambition is obviously to be the Italian pillar for international collaboration with this title, which is Euro-Mediterranean Center, because as we have seen also this morning, I think the Mediterranean area is one of the areas that needs really some kind of coordinated efforts. I have always students struggling to find the data, for example. So the mission of the center is dealing with the Mediterranean area, being based in Italy, obviously, and therefore in Europe. This center is based, let's say, it was established with some national grants, but at the moment it works. The functioning of the center is guaranteed by European funds mainly. So this center is competing and establishing cooperation with European institutions usually to compete for FP7 and now Horizon 2020 grants to survive.
Are there any other questions from the audience?
Carlo, when you say that there are efforts to try to bring together the stream on dynamic climatology and the more managerial stream, can you elaborate a bit on how that happens? How do you create those moments where the two come together?
This is an evolving context, obviously, because we are exploring different ways to make it happen. On the one hand, we have to provide some sound basis, okay? So we need to be specific. But we have either classes that they have to share, okay? Or they are, depending on the years, actually, we invited them to choose one of the classes from the other streams. So they are obviously free to take other classes. We have common activities in terms of seminars. But yeah, this is more or less how it works, okay? We are physically separated in a sense, but we have several activities that are in common, and this is the way we try to at least expose all the students to the other side of the coin, so to say.
Do you also have students that try to develop together? Well, I'm trying to think, you know, if you want to look at the impacts of a certain climatic stress on a coastal area, you might need some data, either, you know, from regional climate models, but then also some using digital elevation models of a certain area. So I wonder if there are students trying to that work in this kind of in both streams in a way.
Historically speaking, students are working obviously either in one of the two, and the specific case you mentioned is the case in which students from Bologna can provide the climate change scenarios to students in Venice who work on the digital elevation models and the analysis of coastal areas, for example, to develop plans and analysis of impacts. Okay, so in my opinion, the critical issue is to make them to understand each other, actually. But then obviously I don't think it's worth to have all of them to know everything, actually, because we need, it's a very specialized field, this, and we need modelers that have a robust basis on in physics, for example, which is the case in Bologna. Quite often students, they come from a master's in physics, actually. While here we have a very diverse group of background, different backgrounds, environmental sciences, in law or economics. So they are quite different communities in a sense, more homogeneous probably in Bologna and much more varied here. Our ambition is to let them to communicate. If we could make an environmental sciences to understand an economist, that would be an enormous improvement of the current situation, in my opinion.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much, Carlo, for your presentation. Please give him a warm hand. Yeah. Then we proceed to the next speaker, and there is a little change in the program. On the program is that Mr. Gianfranco Bettin would give this presentation, but he could not come today, so we have now Mr. Simon Tola, who will give a presentation. He is a project coordinator of Sustainable Energy Action Plan, and this year he was involved in the climate plan of Venice. So he will now present the climate plan of Venice and how they address climate change here in this city. Okay, Mr. Simon Tola, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Good afternoon to everybody. So today I would like to let you see something from the point of view of a small, medium-sized city like Venice, when the local administration is challenging with climate issues. So the city of Venice has already established a lot of initiatives towards CO2 reduction and climate adaptation. What's today is still lacking is that there is not a climate adaptation action plan. In this moment, last year, we approved the Sustainable Energy Action Plan, so we have a clear strategy toward mitigation, CO2 reduction. But, okay, when the city of Venice is talking about climate issues, climate-related issues, we talk about mitigation and adaptation like a unique, like all-comprehensive box. We think that climate change issues and climate change adaptation is not useful if you do not act towards the CO2 emission reduction. So I would like to show you what kind of professionals and expertise were involved during writing a Sustainable Energy Action Plan. I don't know if anybody knows what is Sustainable Energy Action Plan, but I can just make a short introduction. It's an initiative which was born under the European Commission framework, which is called actually the Covenant of Mayors. The mayors of cities of European Union should write a plan to mitigate the emission of CO2 and greenhouse gases, and the minimum target was to write a plan with a 20% greenhouse gases reduction by 2020. So the city of Venice signed for the Covenant of Mayors in 2011, and last December 2012, the plan was approved by the city council. And so what you have to do to make this kind of plan, you have first to do a greenhouse gases inventory, So gather data and analyze them from all the sources of greenhouse gases, and then you have to make a territorial analysis talking about mobility, productive activities, and the building stock. You have to understand what is a possible strategy to cut emissions of CO2 with effective projects. And then it's important to lead a sort of SWOT analysis, understand strengths and weaknesses and opportunities and threats within the existing sector planning. So we led this kind of analysis, and we could understand that the existing sector planning is can be supporting the targets of sustainable energy action plan. There's no when we talk about sustainable action plan, the other issue very important is the communication. So you must be able to communicate the meaning of writing this kind of project. You must be able to involve citizens as stakeholders, and we try to do that using the existing association of stakeholders yet existing in Venice. And obviously you must be able to write projects towards CO2 reduction. We thought that a great role could be played by the information and communication technology for gathering and analyzing data, and also for the monitoring process that will be led in the next few years. And obviously some knowledge about carbon footprint is important to analyze what kind of projects must be included in this kind of plan and what kind of they are less meaningful. And the main outcomes of this project was a clear strategy for the city of Venice. So now the city owns all the numbers, all the data, and the city knows what has to be done to reach CO2 reduction. So no more excuses. And people from different departments, they've been working together on writing this kind of plan. So we didn't use any kind of external consultant, but we try to do it with our forces. And so for local administration means a new approach to cross-cutting teams. This means that the local administration must work in group. This means the use of indicators, and the CO2 becomes a new indicator for the projects led by the local administration, and constant monitoring and improvement, and the stakeholder involvement work. What we have to be improved, what we have to improve is that we have to strengthen communication. In effect, we had no funding for this project, so we just use people working in these issues. We could not lead a communication campaign, and we would like to improve the real-time monitoring from the municipal facilities. At this moment, these data are not available, and data gathering from power and gas distributors. It seems like impossible, but it's still difficult to gather this kind of data from the main private companies who provide gas and power to the city facilities and to the citizens. This is some small figures. Our greenhouse gas emissions inventory is divided from different kind of sources: buildings, transportation, public lighting, and the target, the results that we think we can achieve is 22.67 less percent of CO2 by 2020, comparing with 2005. This year we started working on the adaptation. So this is a little bit different kind of project, and we thought that it's how to say, it's a little bit more difficult to find the boundaries of this kind of project. And so we are actually writing a sort of manifesto that we want to submit to the political commitment, and to define the boundaries, and we want the political commitment to tell us what are the limits of these projects, and this may help you to understand what I am saying. Until today, the city of Venice has worked on risk disaster reduction, and today is working on mitigation and is starting to work on climate change adaptation. We would like to know from the political commitment if we can include in this project some issues about resilience and sustainability. And these are the technical activities that we will lead during the climate change adaptation plan. The first one is the assessment of exposure sensitivity and the potential impacts, adaptive capacity and vulnerability to the climate changes. And to do that, obviously, local administration has not the people, the expertise to do that. So we have asked to the local research institutions like Ca' Foscari, like UAV, and many more, to help us to do that. And then we'll have to lead an analysis of costs of action or inaction. This is important to be. We have to submit this kind of analysis to the city and to the decision makers to let them understand what's really important, what are the priorities to act for adaptation. And obviously, our aim is to include in one strategy the mitigation and the adaptation. And we think that another important issue is about the social effects and the health risks due to climate change. So we try to manage that all with the help of the research institutions, and working with a working group interdepartmental within the city administration. So I try to make a short list of what kind of experts will be needed from a city administration to manage this kind of issues. Obviously, in this moment, not only Venice, but I think that most part of the cities don't own this kind of expertise in some structures. But we think that to manage the future challenges, people who work in strategic planning, in sectoral planning, must be able to include the climate change risks in between the factors that will lead to the final design of the planning. So I wrote something like carbon assessment and greenhouse gas measurement and reporting is important for cities, and new technician will be we'll have to know about energy efficiency and smart grids, renewable energy. I still talking about mitigation and adaptation like one challenge, and modeling extremes in projections of future climate change. Well, in fact, this is not something that cities will really do, but they will need people that are able to understand the results of the researches in this field. Heat, power, and water, and waste, and obviously soil management will have to take into account the issues of climate change, just like urban and mobility planning. And I can go quickly, but I think that something really important is that cities will need project and program managers that can manage all these kind of issues and that will have to manage these cross-cutting teams. And this means something like innovation in the public administration. So these are some challenges I found out and wanted to show you. And this is all for me. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you, Simona, for giving this overview about your the adaptation and mitigation strategies here in Venice. And I also saw that the coming years there are a lot of vacant positions here probably in Venice, looking for experts. Okay. Okay. No funding. Well, personally, I saw some when I walked over the San Marco Square. I saw some adaptation over there. But can you give some examples of some other examples of adaptation measures here in the city?
Yes, in this moment we are there is a lot of people that is looking to the MOSE, the big infrastructure that will protect Venice from the high tides. But in effect, there are soft measures that are already being led from the city administration. I mean, the early warning systems and the early warning system for the high tides. Citizens from Venice can watch in a smartphone or receive an SMS that says that high tide event is coming, and this is high tides are probably the more known issue in Venice about climate change. This is not the only issue that is being managed. In the mainland, a few years ago, we had a big problem with flooding. In fact, there is a general regional problem of managing waters and rivers. But in this case of in the mainland of Venice, which means Mestre, there was a flooding event in 2007, and there was a sort of new institution, was called Commissar, who assessed the priorities to reorganize the water management in the mainland. So something is already being led, and something must be improved. What is still missing is that there are some projects that are related to the climate change, but the internal programmation of the city administration has never taken into account the climate change issues and the climate change, I'd say, projections.
Big challenges ahead. Any other questions from the?
Thank you very much for your presentation, Simona. I had two short questions. The first is this manifesto. I was interested to find out sort of what process led up to that manifesto. Was this a political process, or was this purely an administrative process? Obviously, there are some intricacies, I guess, that you may not be sharing with us, but I think it's important to understand where cities start thinking about how to deal with climate change, and whether indeed this is a political will or rather something else. My second question was whether, I do not know if Venice is part of a twinning program, so twinning cities program. If it is, or perhaps if you know of other examples of other cities in Italy who are twins with another city somewhere else in the world, would you see that as a way forward in thinking about climate change at a city level, so to share and exchange information?
Okay, thank you for both questions. So the first one was about how the idea of manifesto was born, I think. And this is something that was born inside the local administration working group. So it's not a political idea, but it's something was born, how to say, bottom up. We have discussed a lot inside within the working group on as I said, what are the boundaries of this project? If it will only lead to the climate change adaptation, or also if it will include something about resilience and sustainability. And when I talk about sustainability, I also mean the waste management, the tourism management, which is something really relevant for Venice. So we thought that we needed to write a sort of list of contents of what the climate change adaptation plan will include, and then we want to give that to the political commitment. We want the political level to say yes, we want to enlarge the boundaries or not. And this is because we think that we need more strength and more strong political commitment to make this plan work not only today but even in the future. And this was the first question. The second question was about networking, I think. And yes, we are not, I don't know, I don't think that we are part of 20 cities, but we are actually working in different networks. One of these is Eurocities, which is based in Brussels, I think. And with them, we share a lot of European projects aimed to the capacity building, the information and experiences sharing. And the city of Venice joined the C40 network a few months ago, which is the network of the megalopolis. Well, Venice is not a megalopolis, but it's a really peculiar city. So last week we could participate to an event of networking. And we will participate to the Connecting Delta Cities network within the C40 framework. So yes, we obviously think that sharing and networking is very important for us. We don't have all the needed skills to make this kind of plans work, so we need to share with others and gather all the knowledge as possible.
Any other questions?
Yeah, interesting. How public participation is done here, specifically in specific problem relates to climate change. Is there any stakeholder forum? Thanks.
Okay, I must be honest. If we talk about climate change adaptation, we have not started with a specific forum. It is not existing. In effect, when talking about mitigation, this means last year, we could use a sort of big association which is working in the city of Venice. It's called Association for the Strategic Plan, which was a sort of big box containing all the main stakeholders of the city. And there were people and citizens from the main facilities, institutions, and we had people coming in this forum from the universities, from the public transportation company, from the port, the airport, and environmentalist association. So a lot of people could participate. I think that finally we could have 30, 40 people participating in the mitigation action plan. It was quite useful because a lot of them provided us with some projects on mitigation, and how to say, they were committed, they are actually committed to make some mitigation actions by 2020. Even Kafouskari is one of these.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from the public? Okay, Simone, thank you very much for your presentation. Then we move to the next speaker, Mr. Ignacio Musu. Mr. Musu is an economist and former dean of the Venice International University between 1999 and 2005, and he has been awarded Professor Emeritus by the Italian Ministry of Education. He wrote several books on sustainable development and greening the economy, and Mr. Musu will now present lessons learned with China and Eastern Europe.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the organizers of this workshop for giving me the opportunity to present a program that has been taking place here at Venice International University, which is in some sense related to climate change and has to do with, as you see, with China and Eastern Europe, the cooperation between Italy, China, and Eastern Europe. It is not a program which is devoted to students, so it's a training program which the participants to which are civil servants. But it is interesting as an example what can be done for the cooperation of countries like Italy in Europe and the countries in Eastern Europe and China. This is a program which started 10 years ago. It's not very clear. Okay, and it's carried out by one of the Center of Venice International Universities as a joint program with the Italian Ministry of the Environment, Land and Sea, and it has two basic components. One, which is mainly devoted to China, and the other one, which is mainly devoted to Eastern Europe and other countries. It started with Eastern Europe and widened to other countries. The aim of the program was to support the creation of capacity building, so to make these people meet experiences in Italy and Europe concerning sustainable development and issues and policies for sustainable development, and so help to train professionals to deal with the problems connected to the implementation of a strategy of sustainable development. This is a wide framework in which, of course, climate change gradually took. But what is interesting is that we started in 2003 when the climate change was not particularly at the core of the topic chosen by the participant institution, but gradually it developed to become one of the most important issues. Let me say a few words with for the program with the Eastern European Black Sea region. Basically, it started with a group of East, Central, and Eastern European countries, which at that time were joining the European Union, and it was carried on with the Regional Environment Center, which is a center located in Budapest, which was created to support the progressive joining of the East, Central and Eastern European countries to European Union, but then widen to other areas, like, for example, Central Asia, Kazakhstan in particular, the Black Sea region, particularly based on Turkey, Russian Federation, and also we also had a course with Belarus. You see that there were 46 training sessions. What I mean by training session is something that lasts a couple of weeks of intensive work here in this island. And as you can see, 11 training sessions has been devoted to climate change, both mitigation and adaptation. And typical issues are energy on one side and the implementation at the level of sustainable cities on the other. But these 11 training sessions came later. At the beginning, they were not present in the program. This is, as you can see, this is a program that in 10 years involved more than 600 participants. So many per year. But when we come to China, the situation is different because this was part of a Sino-Italian cooperation program for environmental protection, which in Italy is basically carried on by the Italian Ministry of Environment, Land and Sea. And we started in 2003 with, these are different Chinese institutions. We started with the first two that you can see there, the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences and the Ministry of Science and Technology. That was in 2003. And then other Chinese institutions added. The Ministry of Environmental Protection, originally it was a state agency for environmental protection. It recently became a ministry. 3 municipalities, the Beijing municipality, the Shanghai municipality, Tianjin municipality, each of them, as you are a bit familiar with how environmental policy is organized in China, each of them has its own specific environmental protection bureau. Recently, we added, with the specific topic of climate change, NDRC, which is a very important institution in China, which is practically taking care of the climate change policy in China, and very recently this year, the Ministry of Industry and Technology. And these are the different years. Of course, the participants are much more than in the Eastern Europe program. We achieved almost 9,000 Chinese civil servants visited this island in 10 years, organizing periodically courses. So we have been able to reach a consistent number of people, and of course also a consistent number of problems in these kind of topics. We provided an opportunity not only to the basic reason, the basic argument was how Europe implements sustainable development policy and climate change policy. Chinese participants were very much interested in knowing the different approaches, different policies, the legal framework, the economic instruments, the organization of the administration, the way energy policies are carried on, and so on. And we also tried to provide a number of site visits. We tried also to involve among the faculty, not only academics, but more specifically people coming from firms, from the private sector. And you can see the topics here. Initially, we basically the topics were required by the Chinese participants, not proposed by us. They were requiring us to provide them with with the informations, with something related, as I said, to the European ways to approach this kind of issues. If you look at the topics, they are very traditional up to a certain point. Let's say the first 5 are very typical. Then we discovered that first of all, we had the opportunity to see how China is really changing in its attitude towards sustainable development and climate change. Things are completely different now from when they were in 2003. For example, climate change is a very recent topic. Early, they were interested in air quality in urban setting. That was not related to climate change. Now, the issue of air quality is more related to climate change. Also, the way they deal with energy, the way we deal with eco-innovation. As you know, there are in China plans and strategies for building a low-carbon economy. Also, there is a problem of how to implement international environmental agreements, to understand what is the attitude of the Western world compared to what is the attitude of a country like China. And, well, these are data, I don't want to insist on that. What is important is the dissemination. Because what we have done is to build up a sort of community. If you think about around 9,000 people, they joined this sustainable development community through a web portal. Each of them has the access to all the presentations that were presented in different courses. There is a forum where they can exchange experiences, and this I think it is an interesting outcome of this program. There is also periodically a newsletter which is published, and also it is online. What were the lessons that we have learned from this experience? First of all, we touched with our hands how in emerging countries this new problematic was gradually emerging. Initially, for example, the Chinese were interested in specific topics. For example, clean development mechanism. Clean development mechanism is a typical mechanism through which an emerging country like China can receive funds from the developed part of the world to develop projects to reduce CO2 emissions. But then there was a step forward from that, and the need of creating a human capital, let's say, able to deal with the strategy of sustainable development in the perspective of dealing with climate change. My personal experience with China through this program was that I see not easy to continue with the achievement of an international agreement in terms, for example, of deciding caps on the emissions, or how much to divide them between developed and developing nations, how much to organize instruments, even economic instruments, to deal with that problem, because you know, there is a clear feeling when you speak with the participants to these courses of something that we read also on the newspaper when we consider the attitude of China in international agreements. While us, as developed countries, we insist on the fact that the emerging countries will be responsible for the aggregate evolution of CO2 emissions in the future. Countries like China, they make clear that the emission per capita are still very low, and we have to deal with our past responsibility. So this is something that creates a lot of obstacles and makes the possibility of achieving an international agreement in terms of caps of organization of economic instruments very difficult. What, on the contrary, is very clear is the opportunity given by technological cooperation. This is something that appears, in my opinion, from this experience as the way out to achieve true cooperation between developed countries, Europe if you want, and emerging countries, as far as our experience with China is concerned. But then the understanding that the problem as such, I refer here more to the mitigation than to the adaptation, is a problem of finding out the correct mix of technologies. And we have to cooperate together. If you take China, for example, China now is doing a lot in terms of technologies for new renewable energy. And the problem is how to implement cooperation. And I believe that if we want to achieve some relevant step forward in that direction, from what I learned from this experience, I would suggest that also these international programs, like Master PhD, they focus more on opportunities for technological cooperation, scientific and technological cooperation between what we call developed and emerging countries. This is what I wanted to say as a lesson that I learned from this experience. Thank you.
So you say there should be more focus on technological cooperation, and if I'm correct, I saw that in 2003 there were 9,000 Chinese civil servants coming to Venice, to this university. Oh, in total it was 9,000. Oh, in 10 years, okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so how is that now? Has the number increased or decreased over the last years?
We have to stop at a certain point when we have reached the number of courses that we have. We cannot, of course, have more than 22 courses per year. Because, so I don't know whether the program will continue. It has been a very interesting experience. We have some Chinese students from a couple of Chinese universities, Tsinghua and Dongji, that now are also visiting. This is a let's say a joint outcomes of this initiative. But what I wanted to stress is the changing of the way of approaching environmental policy on the light of climate change is something that is recent. It doesn't go back to 2003. It's something that we started to see towards the end of the decade, 2007, 2008, not earlier. Now it's a very important issue.
Okay, I think the whole Lean CC project was implemented because of that urgency of climate change. Are there any questions from the audience?
Thank you very much for your presentation, and obviously it provokes the question that I think we were addressing in Lean CC as well, which is, where does this take us into the future when it comes to academic partnerships? For instance, through master exchange programs. At this moment, the Chinese students are coming this way. Can we imagine that in 10 years' time, Italian students, or for that matter from the Netherlands, Dutch students are going to China or to Indonesia? What is your vision on this, and what would be, let's say, the basic conditionalities under which that situation would change, in which it's no more assumed, no more logical that perhaps only Chinese students or students from those parts of the world come to Europe rather than also the other way around?
I believe that it is absolutely urgent that European students are going to China. Not only Chinese students coming to Europe, but European students going to China, possibly developing double degree or joint degree, which is not very simple because you know China has its own institutions and you have to pass through the approval, for example, of the Chinese Ministry of Education. We had some attempt, we made some attempt because in Venice, the University of Venice has a very good department in Chinese studies. And so there is the opportunity of progressing in your direction. One thing that I see is that the importance of, on one hand, the Chinese students who are visiting us, all the Chinese students you see there, they are coming from Tsinghua University, and they are taking part to our programs, and they know English. The problem is that English should also be accepted as a teaching language in China. In one sense, it is easier for our Chinese students here from the University of Venice to go to China, even if they are not, for example, students of economics, but they are students of Chinese history, to go to China, where they can very easily become qualified also in economics issues. There is something to work on that. It's absolutely necessary. Of course, the possibility of using English is, for example, yesterday you had an example with the CLIMB program presented by Hilda. There were two Chinese universities and the students, and through English, where we have been able to build up a joint program. To build a program is something, to implement it is something more difficult, because once you have a program, you need to convince the institutions to implement this joint program. I personally believe that online education would be extremely important. For example, we also had an experience here of online courses. We had an experiment. We have been able to reach I think 12 or 13 points in China, some of them I don't know where, and to interact, because this is something that should be developed. Programs of this type, but I agree. We should do a lot of effort. We should make a lot of effort if we want to create the human capital basis for this technological scientific cooperation, to create a double way, not as it was when I was young. We all wanted to go to the States. Now I think that we also have to imagine to go to emerging countries. Not only a problem of China, it's a problem of India, it's a problem of Indonesia, it's a problem of the Central and East Asia, Africa. Why should they only come here? Why should we have a joint an exchange and a joint program?
Yeah, it's indeed a challenge to arrange all these networks and develop joint degrees, but very interesting for the participants, I think.
Thanks a lot for that presentation. It has got quite an extended period where you have actually been actively involved with those other countries, East European and China, on sustainable development. And possibly towards the end, to the current issue that you are now discussing, and another question that was asked earlier from another presentation about stakeholder participation and all that. There is something that I start sensing possibly is not feasible in our own LIAN-CC activities, it seems like we have been drawn so much to the hard science of climate change and technologies of adaptation and all that. And it seems like the one dimension that has been possibly been forgotten, whether we are doing the modules and whether we are doing our own seminars and conferences, it's the whole idea of the processes of the various levels of dialogues that actually happen around climate change. Whether we are talking about it in the way that was mentioned this morning about adaptation, the whole question of localizing or scaling down on models, rather than just seeing it as a technical activity, seeing it as a way of facilitating ownership of issues of climate change and all that down at the grassroots level, not just a matter of a scientist bringing down the information and the knowledge to a local context, but seeing it also as a grassroots upward process of facilitating that ownership. And it seems like the soft dimensions where humanities can start playing a role, whether it's the psychologists, whether it is the sociologists, whether it is the anthropologists. It seems like that's a dimension. And I did hear something that was mentioned in earlier on about the Foscari's approach about emphasizing the sciences, but I didn't hear that humanities are also being considered to be a big part of that. And I am wondering whether we possibly are not getting lost again, just thinking that facts and facts and facts is what matters, and forgetting that there is also the point at which mediation across different frontiers. And that's, I guess, what was mentioned with Rodhat's program yesterday, mediating across different frontiers, and that calls for different skills. And I guess your experience with China is what you are now sharing with us. It seems like we are not building up on that level of competencies and skills, but I don't know what your view might be on that.
The question is for everybody, not only. But anyway, my experience is that you are right. Maybe I have stressed too much the point of technological and scientific cooperation, but this is because, particularly on mitigation, this is a crucial issue. You know, we know that these big global problems have not been solved until there was some agreement on the technological solution. Take, for example, the ozone layer depletion. That was easier to address because there was the technological solution. In the case of climate change, it's much more complex. But what you mentioned is right. I feel a bit uncomfortable as an economist because we as economists are particularly inadequate to deal with something which is more complex than market and public intervention. But this is precisely the case. We need to involve. We need what a Nobel Prize in economics, Elinor Ostrom, calls the polycentric approach. Something which involves also the local communities, the participation, dialogues, which is particularly important with climate change because if you don't have people convinced that this is an important issue, it's almost impossible to do anything, even in the adaptation, because you can scare people, but it is not scare people with the consequences, but it is not, you shouldn't conclude that people will follow you in addressing resources in one direction rather than in another. So it's absolutely important, this kind of interdisciplinary approach, which involves also the participation of community. For example, our friend in China now, it is clear that there is something, it's very difficult to define what is happening, coming from the bottom of the society. I remember that when we started this program, in the Chinese newspaper, there was no uh, practical reference to environmental problems. If you open a Chinese newspaper in English, because I don't know, today, like China Daily, almost every day there is a problem concerning environmental issues and the concern of people on environmental issues and the relation with people with their ruling class, which is not matching the expectations in terms of adequate choices. So that dimension that you mentioned is absolutely essential. This is my feeling.
Okay, thank you very much for this interesting presentation. Yeah. And now we move to the last part of the LeanCC conference, to the summary and the closing, which is done by Margareta and Veronica.
Yes, thank you very much. This is perhaps the saddest part of the conference, because it's the moment to say goodbye. Thank you to everybody who came, but I would like to say thank you to all those who came and shared their experiences and views on our project with us. Recapitulating briefly what we did, especially for those who were not here yesterday, we presented the activities of our project, of the LeanCC project, the single elements we implemented in order to ease the contact between students from Southeast Asia, especially from Indonesia and the Philippines, and from South Africa on the one side, and to European universities on the other side, as we implemented platforms, e-learning courses. We had long discussions on that, and we were able, with your help, to confront these experiences with those you made, for instance, with the Climate project we partly used also, and with your views on the sense of needs of climate change, competences and activities. This was mainly the contents of yesterday, including some light shed on very specific problems and activities made in our partner countries from Indonesia and South Africa. Today the accent was more on getting impressions, and this especially was led to the presence, and I want to say thank you once more to all of you who came, the students of the PhD course, which was presented before by Carlo. The first year students are present here, and thank you for your interest in our conference. A bit it was the argument was also focalizing on their future studies for the next 2 years, on what competences and are needed, what is done in terms of climate change, what does it mean working for climate change adaptation and mitigation. And I think we had very good and interesting experiences, both from the local context, from the Mediterranean view, as we are now on the Mediterranean. Most of the European project partners are from the northern part, but we in Venice are on the Mediterranean, so somehow on a link between Africa, Asia, and Europe, and on specific experience of the from the municipality of Venice, where we are located. And obviously, the end of the project always wants to be the beginning of a new one. So there have been very, very many indications, invitations, and directions for future collaborations, both from the VU, which has been our host here. Thank you very much for having us here. It's a splendid place, and we were able to work in a very nice environment, a very quiet environment. but it is also a challenging environment with respect to what you are doing, and especially with the experiences you have with international cooperation with China. This can be one future collaboration, as well as the initiatives of University Ca' Foscari and the municipality of Venice, albeit not having any funding, is looking forward to collaboration, I think.
Yeah, well, just a few words to conclude this. They're related mostly to the fact that we have had quite lengthy discussions yesterday on what should we do with the LeanCC platform. Should we, who should maintain it? What should we do with the e-courses that we have worked on across universities? Most of the partners that have worked with us have built the e-courses as well. I think the general sense was that we want to continue this platform, and we want to continue using the e-courses. So you're welcome to have a look and see what kind of modules and topics are offered. I think we'll also try to keep the website on to share what the consortium members are working on specific issues related to their research and their training efforts. So that will also be probably continuing. And I think that's it. We will have proceedings for this conference available online, as all the other conferences that we had in the past 2-3 years. So I think we have some interesting outcomes, and we had some interesting discussions. I hope you will find the time to read them. Okay, thanks a lot. Well, see you again in Venice. Thanks a lot, Margareta.